has been caught speeding by New Mexico Highway Patrol. Speed was 82 miles per hour. Penalty is $105. DR4NK is now in Stockton. Progress is 8%. Heading to San Diego. Beluga is now in Gallup. Progress is 85%. Heading to Holbrook. Boba Gostof Bangladesh, from Canada, joined the server. Driver rank is 175.
Because I saw it 15 years ago and remembered it already. There's in the section of recipes for goose
Sergio
recipes.
Transporta
You
has
have
started a
an
job from
instruction on
Sydney
how to
going to
prepare a
Portland.
goose wing.
Pay is
And I don't mean a braised
$663.
goose wing, a fried goose wing.
Yes.
I mean literally what you call a goose wing.
Yes.
You tell us
this
about
is Mummy
the goose
always
wing.
had this, and so had Aunt Lynn and everybody. You'd always have geese for Christmas, and basically, again, so we learned how to pluck them, for example, and all of that. The 2 layers of feathers, and there's down on the on a goose or a duck as well. We kept the down for pillows and for feather beds and things, but then the wing, there's 3 joints in a wing. The final joint, which is about, I suppose, what's that, about a foot long, has a very pointy end, and so you'd always keep the wing, cut off the wing, and then you'd dry it off the back of the cooker so that the little end bit dried off and it wasn't smelly or anything. And then that was used to get into corners that no duster would get into, in behind
Progress
cupboards
is
and this, that, and the
7%.
other. And I
Heading
still
to
have a
Great
wing in the
Falls.
house here, actually.
DR4NK
So that
has been caught speeding by California Highway
A
Patrol.
feather duster.
Speed was 81 miles per hour.
I've just never
seen a
Penalty is
recipe for a feather
$90.
duster.
It's
before,
brilliant
but-
for now that we have radiators, of course. It's brilliant for getting in behind radiators and all sorts of little tiny corners that things can't go. I wonder, will any of your listeners remember some of that? They might indeed, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is my point, right? Because it's a cookbook, and obviously you teach it. It's the world famous Ballymaloe Cookery School, but again, it's beyond the recipes. It's beyond what's delicious on the plate, although obviously that matters to you.
Yeah.
But it's really about living this life. I mean, I guess now we would call it a sustainable life or whatever. But I think even it seems to me to be more philosophical than sustainability. The way we talk about sustainability is
Rubber duck is now in
certainly
Gillette.
important.
Progress
Probably the
is
most important thing that we
56%.
don't talk about enough.
Heading
But
to Glendive.
And
but it's not
nutritious
a
food.
it's not a
都设置好了，我们出发吧。
it's not a
Anabu
say this? The
8991
way- the-
has
the
just
sense I get
completed
from
a
you
job to
when you
Odessa
talk about,
in
well, you have a
36
goose,
minutes
there's
and
goose
6
wings, and
seconds.
you have the little duster.
A new best time has been set for this job.
It's really about
Anabu
living in harmony,
8991
right, with
is
your
now number
environment.
120 on the
A
leaderboard.
particular kind of life connected to nature. if you
Has
think of
just
it.
completed
Women
a
are
job to
totally
Holbrook
connected.
in
Especially when
25
students
minutes
come,
and
and
57
students come from all
seconds.
over the world and come
A
to
new
the
best
very
time has been
Yoga.
set for this job. Is now number
Yoga.
132 on the leaderboard.
The first thing I say to them, first I talk about, I run my hands through the soil and I say to them, look, do you know what this is? In America, people call this dirt, but we call it soil. And I say, remember, this is what we all totally depend on, these 3 or 4 inches of soil around the world for our very existence of what's going on. And then I say to them, and I quote Lady Eve Balfour, remember, the health of the soil, the health of the plant, the health of the animal, the health of the human are all connected. And unless we have rich, fertile soil, we don't have. And they're thinking, well, I didn't say anything about this in the brochure. And they think some kind of aged hippie on a mission. But then I say to them, you're here for 3 months, and I want you.
Beluga has just completed a job to Holbrook in 26 minutes and 34 seconds. EL88 said the best time for this job, Beluga, is now number 133 on the leaderboard. Heinz Chubby is now in Santa Fe. Progress is 42%, heading to Holbrook.
Super curious.
Hot Dog Man 1560 is now in Dalhart. Progress is 76%, heading to Amarillo. DJTNHN is now in Austin. Progress is 69%, heading to New Orleans.
Very often in different
DR4NK has been caught speeding by California Highway Patrol. Speed was 77 miles per hour. Penalty is $30.
We have so many
Site Black from Valdosta, Georgia, United States, joined the server. Driver rank is 22.
Yes, Father, there, but not they don't get married, but afterwards, yes. So anyway, I've gone off in another tangent talking, but you know, how lovely is it? Of all the skills,
请注意
you're
您
an
的时
astronaut
速。
or a dentist or a lawyer or an architect, the one thing we need more than anything is to be able to the joy you can spread by being able to cook and
请注意
share
您
it
的
with
时
your
速。
family. And you know, I often think I could be teaching maths or algebra or something, but I can't teach maths, and it doesn't change people's lives in the way teaching people how to
56%,
live
heading to Dalhart.
Look on people's
Paul
faces
is now in
when they
San
have the first
Antonio.
loaf of bread.
Progress
You
is
can see how
66%, heading to
oh
New
my
Orleans.
God, it's
Mr.
more
Johnny B
satisfaction
from
if they
Georgia,
just pulled
United
off a big
States, joined the server.
Anyway,
Driver rank is 113.
Well, I
Yes, sir.
certainly see why somebody would have
Make it
learned
so?
cooking and then come home and tell everyone that, oh my god.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I fixed it.
Well, yes, and when they leave, then I ask them
Yeah,
to share.
like that.
I say, now you go out there and share with others what you've been fortunate.
Where you at?
Has started a job from Victoria, going to Ortiza. Pay is $405. Heinz Chubby has been caught speeding by New Mexico Highway Patrol. Speed was 81 miles per hour. Penalty is $90.
Is somehow or other to source
Going to
nutrient
Louisiana. Like almost 2 hours I'm on this
to
thing already.
feed ourselves and our families healthy, and that is not an easy thing nowadays. If you know what you want, it's becoming more and more difficult. That's why we
I
encourage
can
people
get is
to start to grow something on their windowsills.
Come again?
Just to have something.
I'm a quick travel to you. Oh, and I have new truck.
Every bite will do a good lot of
I have
damage.
new truck.
Well, thank you so much, Doreen. It's
Nice.
such a joy to talk to you.
前
Well,
方
thank you,
左转
Francis. It was a joy for me too, I can tell you. I had lots of fun.
左转
Dorina Allen is the author of Forgotten Skills of Cooking and many other books. You can learn more about
Round
Valley
Cooler
Cookery
from
School
Serbia
at
joined the server.
cookingisfun.com.
Driver rank is
And Dorina left us with her recipe for
186.
spotted dog, aka railway cake. You can find it at splendidtable.org. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.
Me in Houston? I'm gonna pass you.
The Splendid Table is supported by Progressive
The
Insurance.
job has been
Progressive is
canceled.
currently
$500 penalty applied.
We're interested in building a career and joining
DR4NK is now in Bakersfield. Progress is 51%, heading to San Diego.
And by Legacy Box, committed to helping preserve moments that matter this holiday season by digitizing videos and photos, then storing them in the cloud so they can be gifted for generations to come. LegacyBox.com. The Splendid Table was created by Sally Swift and Lynn Rosetta Casper. It's made each week
Well, I'm
by
heading
producer
over
Jennifer
there
Lupi,
towards Houston,
producer
so-
Erica Romero, and managing producer Sally Swift. Jordan Turgeon is our digital producer. Lauren Humpert is our senior podcast production manager. Thanks for listening. I'm Francis
前
Lam,
方
and
左
this
转
is APM, American Public Media.
As a parent, managing a digital world of smartphones, social media, and virtual reality can feel overwhelming.
The issue of screen time is not that screen time is inherently toxic so much as what we are not doing because we're on a screen.
I'm Sarah.
What's
We'll
up,
take
guys?
a deep dive into all things doom scrolling and screen time
Remember
on
me?
All Things Considered from NPR News.
Yeah.
this afternoon
右
or
转
on Public Radio
I glitched out the
895.
other day.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is
provided.
provided by the founders of the Shining Honor
右转
Project, funding the cleaning and honoring of veterans' headstones by adults with developmental challenges through partnerships with A New Leaf, Gatesway, and other caregiving agencies. More at
前方左
shininghonor.org.
转
Public Radio 89.5,
左转
WGS HD1, Tulsa.
I'm Shankar Vedantam, and from
没事，
NPR,
我会再次算一
this
条新
is
的
Hidden
路线。
Brain. Each week, we delve into the unconscious patterns driving our behavior. Through science,
Not a lot of people know that this is happening.
I fell off my chair when I saw the initial set
好
of
的，
results.
让我们再计算一条新的路线，
did something extremely
I thought, okay, that's it. I can't take this anymore. I'm gonna
重
quit.
新计算
we
中
give。you new ways to see yourself
There's more than one of you in there.
and the world around you.
Empathy is the understanding that someone else's world is just as real as yours.
We tend to think of courage as a personality trait. Either you have it or you don't. But what if courage is more like a muscle that you can strengthen?
Courage is a
我们
choice.
终于来到了
And it's a choice you make in the face of fear. It forces you to become acquainted with the discomfort we feel when we are scared.
How to choose courage. First,
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dan Ronan. Human rights groups are expressing alarm about an internet blackout in Iran as security forces crack down on protest. President Trump has been warning the U.S. could come to the defense of those protesters. Israel is watching closely. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
The world is in awe of the immense bravery of Iran's citizens. That's how Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu started his cabinet meeting, as Israelis keep close tabs on the protests. We all hope the Persian nation will soon be liberated from the yoke of tyranny, Netanyahu says, condemning the killing of peaceful protesters. Over the weekend, he spoke about the Iran protests with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Iranian authorities have accused the U.S. and Israel of fomenting unrest. They describe the protesters as terrorists and rioters. The protests began 2 weeks ago against the crumbling Iranian economy. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Minnesota officials are urging protesters to remain peaceful. More demonstrations are planned to protest the deadly shooting of a woman by an ICE agent. NPR immigration correspondent Sergio Martinez Beltran explains.
The Department of Homeland Security says more than 2,000 immigration agents are on the ground in Minnesota. That's actually more than 3 times the numbers of officers in the Minneapolis Police Department.
Armstrong Point 26 has been caught
Multiple
speeding by
residents in
Texas Highway
Minneapolis
Patrol.
neighborhoods told
Speed
NPR
was
they've seen
86
ICE
miles
agents
per hour.
going door to door,
Penalty is
knocking for undocumented people.
$165.
Vice President J.D. Vance in a recent news conference said the same, that agents were going door to door to find, quote, criminal illegal aliens. And this is highly unusual.
Hot
ICE
Dog
usually
Man
does targeted
156L
operations, but
has
this
just
is
completed
different.
a job
Now,
in
we reached out
Amarillo
to the
in
Department
30
of Homeland
minutes and
Security,
19
but the agency
seconds.
did not respond
A
to a
new
request
best
for
time
comment
has
on
been
that.
set for this
A
job.
suspect
Hot
has
Dog
been
Man
arrested in relation to a
156L
fire
is now
that
number
damaged a Mississippi
149 on the
synagogue.
leaderboard.
Mississippi Public
DR4NK
Broadcasting's
has been
Shamara
caught speeding
Mohammed
by
reports.
California Highway Patrol. Speed was 78 miles per hour. Penalty is $45.
They did not see any competent heat sources other than human involvement. At that time, they determined that this fire was arson.
Belton says a suspect has been arrested and charged. Local authorities and the FBI are investigating the potential of this being a hate crime. Eitan Weiss is Israeli Consul General of the southeastern United States.
We live in the 21st century, and there's no room for anti-Semitism or hate crimes against anyone.
Zach Schimper, president of the Beth Israel congregation, says his community is devastated but ready to rebuild. No injuries occurred in relation to the fire. For NPR News, I'm Shamir Mohammed in Jackson, Mississippi.
And from Washington, it's NPR. 3 NFL playoff games are on tap this afternoon. The Buffalo Bills are now at Jacksonville Jaguars. Buffalo leads that game 27-24 late in the fourth quarter. The San Francisco 49ers win the 4:30 game at Philadelphia against the Eagles. The Los Angeles Chargers wrap up the playoff games tonight against the New England Patriots, and then the Steelers play Houston tomorrow. Nevada's top election official says he's exploring potentially new ways to identify when a ballot is mailed. As Lucia Starbuck with member station KUNR reports, the Postal Service is advising against relying on postmarks.
Nevada, Texas, and New York are among the states that allow mail ballots to be counted for a certain period after the election, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. But that's been thrown into flux. The Postal Service says it's now more likely that your mail will be postmarked once it reaches a processing facility about a day after it's collected. Nevada Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar says there are solutions.
You just put an Apple tag on every mail ballot and you know where it is at all times. But again, that's not practical.
Aguilar said the state must find a solution before its June primary. The Supreme Court could decide this year whether states can count postmarked mail ballots that arrive after Election Day. For NPR News, I'm Lucia Starbuck in Carson City.
The Washington National Opera is now the latest arts organization cutting ties to the Kennedy Center as a result of President Trump assuming control of the center's governing board and adding his name to the facility. The decision made over the weekend. I'm Dan Ronan, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Wallace Foundation, an independent, nonpartisan research foundation, collaborating with grantees and partners in the arts and
A new best time has been set for this job. Heinz Chubby is now number 115 on the leaderboard.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by Signature Symphony, presenting Aaron Copland and the Wild West, a wild ride of a concert featuring cowboy songs and folk melodies, January 24th at 7:30 at the TCC Vantrease Pace. More at signaturesymphony.org.
A listener-supported service of the University of Tulsa, Public Radio 89.5, AWGS HD1.
Heinz Chubby has started a job from Wichita, going to Socorro. Pay is $436. There are 3 drivers on this job. Selfless has just completed a job to Dalhart in 30 minutes and 43 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Selfless is now number 147 on the leaderboard. DR4NK has been caught speeding by California Highway Patrol. Speed was 80 miles per hour. Penalty is $75.
It helps him see that he is, in fact, a lion, that he was brave all along. The lion always had the capacity to be brave. He just didn't know it. The Wizard of Oz is a work of fiction, but every day we see the cowardly lion's dilemma in tales from real life. Situations where people are called upon to be brave.
DJTNHS is now in Lake Charles. Progress is 86%. Heading to New Orleans.
Fear, of course, is not always
Arshel Point 26 is now in Amarillo. Progress is 38%. Heading to Reading.
But fear can keep us from living our best lives, reaching for our
Rubber
dreams,
Duck is now in Miles City. Progress is 82%. Heading to Glendive.
This week on Hidden Brain, how to discover our inner lion. Sometimes courage means running into a burning building or standing up to an armed enemy. Other times, it involves speaking up when everyone else stays silent, or stepping forward when your instinct is to shrink back. Today, we look at those defining moments when life calls on us to be brave, when the choice is between cowardice and courage. Ranjay Gulati is a behavioral scientist at Harvard Business School. He studies how people behave under conditions of great risk.
Sergio Transportes is now in Glasgow. Progress is 11%. Heading to Portland.
Thank you, Shankar. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ranjay, you've looked into the story of a high school language teacher in China. On the afternoon of May 12, 2008, he was in his classroom conducting a lesson. Tell me who he was and what happened next.
Fan Mei Zong was a teacher. And he was in the middle of his class talking about an esoteric 18th century literary Chinese scholar when the building started to shake. Got a little uncomfortable, but then the tremor turned into a full-blown
has been caught
earthquake where
speeding
now
by
everything was
Louisiana
shaking.
Highway Patrol. Speed was
Van
83
Maison
miles per
didn't
hour.
hesitate.
Penalty is $120.
He opened the door and he ran out of the building. He was the first one out of the building, actually. And he got to the main ground, and in fact, the boundary wall around the ground starts to collapse also.
Wow.
And the students eventually also come out. And he asked his students, where were you? Why didn't you come out? And they asked him, where were you? He got so scared.
Rubber duck is now in Glendive. Progress is 90%. Heading to
waiting for direction
Glendive.
on what to do. Their question was, you're our teacher. You should have been there to help us get out of there, rather than run out of there first. And Van Maison had no remorse whatsoever. And he said, look, when it comes to my own physical safety, I'm a coward. And so I needed to save myself first. And that was how he completely rationalized his response.
So eventually, the earthquake resulted in nearly 90,000 people reported or presumed dead. Many children died across the region when school buildings crumbled on top of them. As news reports
Cycle
got out
66
about
is now in
this
San
teacher's
Antonio.
behavior, what
Progress
was the
is
public
17%. Heading to Ortiza.
His reaction was one of outrage. At one point, he was considered the most hated man in China. They had derogatory nicknames for him, like Running Fan. And so he then comes out and speaks and tries to defend and justify his own action. And this has an even bigger backlash. As a society, we really can't stand cowardice. Cowardice is one of the most derogatory terms you can use to label somebody.
Steel 10 is
And
now in
that was the
Mojave.
label.
Progress is
He lost
3%.
his job,
Heading to Illy.
and it didn't end for several months after.
DR4NK has just completed a job to San Diego in 33 minutes and 58 seconds.
You tell another story
A new
about a
best time has
life-threatening
been set for
emergency.
this
This
job.
one occurred in 2023 on the
DR4NK
subway
is
in
now
New York
number
City.
96
A
on
man
the
named Adam
leaderboard.
Klotz was riding the train when he saw something happening in the subway car. What did he observe and what did he do, Ranjit?
So Adam Klotz is a meteorologist. He's on his way to work, and he sees some young kids harassing an older gentleman. And you know, as a good Samaritan and a good citizen, he chooses to intervene. Nobody else is doing anything. And he just asks them to stop doing what they're doing. And that then leads them to redirect attention to him. He then tries to avoid confrontation by going to another car. They follow him. And at some point they start to beat him up rather viciously. And nobody else comes to his defense. And that to him was the shocker, that nobody else stood up for him the way he had for the older gentleman.
Arsha Point 26 is now in Tucumcari. Progress is 43%. Heading to Reading.
So here we see examples of both courage and cowardice in a single subway car. Ranjay, I understand that you yourself once saw this juxtaposition of courage and cowardice in your own life. You were a teenager living in India with your mother. She had started a successful business. Set the scene for me and tell me what happened.
So my mother was a successful fashion designer. She had a business, and she bought herself a piece of farmland outside New Delhi, where she was going to have a farmhouse for the weekend getaway. This land turned out to be not very valuable. The developer was chasing her to buy it. She said, I don't want it.
Rubber Duck has just completed a job to Glendive in 44 minutes and 16 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Rubber Duck is now number 64 on the leaderboard.
This is the last time we'll ever bother her. He said, okay, fine, said the just a regular gentleman wearing a blazer comes in, sits down across from my mother, where she's sitting on a sofa. And he's front of on the table a blank check.
Cox50
signed.
has started a job from Sacramento, going to Modesto. Pay is $85. Stereo Virus 219 from Cornwall, United Kingdom, joined the server. Driver rank is 167.
She pushes back and says, no, I'm not selling. He finally said, ma'am, I agree. I have no idea. I have to get your signature.
In Ontario, progress is 14%, heading to Cheyenne.
And he reveals he has a gun tucked in his waist. I'm standing at the door watching
from Serbia joined the server. Driver rank is 188.
I'm looking at the timing. Should I wait? Should I let him reach for the gun? Maybe it's a bluff. Should I go call the guard at the gate? I'm working this out in my head. My mother doesn't hesitate at all. She gets up from her sofa, walks across the table, and slaps him right across the face. He doesn't even see it coming. And then she says, how dare you come into my house and try to bully me and try to tell me to give you my land, and you're gonna threaten me with a gun? Get out of here. He doesn't see it coming. He scampers away, forgetting his checkbook. I have to run after him to give him his checkbook.
2010 has started a job from Sacramento, going to Modesto. Pay is $85. There are 2 drivers on this job.
Weren't you scared?
When you thought about your own behavior in that moment, Ranjay, I mean, it's perfectly understandable why you would freeze in that moment. But when you reflected back on yourself, did you see some deeper character traits that prompted you not to act in that moment?
I think, maybe there was something in myself when I wasn't
DJTNA10 is now in Baton Rouge. Progress is 94%, heading to New
sometimes my
Orleans.
deliberations would take longer than normal. And whereas my mother was a very, being a self-made businesswoman, she was a very confident person. And I think in her mind, she had a sense of herself as somebody had a can-do mindset.
Stereo Virus 219 has started a job from Sacramento, going to Modesto. Pay is $85. There are 3 drivers on this job.
And she was often being pushed around.
Sean 1391 is now in Nampa. Progress is 18%,
So my own
heading to
hesitation was
Cheyenne. Heinz Chubby is now in Dodge City. Progress is 19%, heading to Socorro.
I'm doing my risk
Heinz
analysis,
Chubby
scenario
has
planning, working
teleported.
out the
The
scenario.
job
in
has
my
been
head.
canceled.
Which I thought
$500
was
penalty
okay. I mean,
applied.
that's what I'm supposed to
Rubber
do.
Duck has
But it was
started
a
a job
learning
from
moment.
Glendive, going to
It was a
Butte.
learning
Pay is $272.
In the aftermath of this, did you feel like a coward?
Absolutely. I did. Again, as even though I was only 14 years old, as her son, I felt like it was my duty and responsibility to be the one who had protected her versus her having to do it for herself. But it also made me realize very quickly that fear can
Be more careful has been caught speeding by Washington Highway Patrol. Speed was 76 miles per hour. Penalty is $15.
Doesn't mean you do nothing. And that line kind of has always stayed. Just because you're scared doesn't mean you do nothing.
Sean 1391 is now in Boise. Progress is 21%, heading to Cheyenne.
Require a fateful choice. Will we hang back in a state of fear? Or will we plunge ahead into brave and
Has been
courageous
caught
action?
speeding by Louisiana Highway Patrol.
When we come back,
Speed was
the
81 miles per hour.
attitudes that
Penalty is
separate the
$90.
timid from the bold. You're listening to Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedanta. This is NPR.
Be more careful is now in Coeur d'Alene. Progress is 52%, heading to Great Falls. Sergio Transportes is now in Havre. Progress is 27%, heading to Portland. Psycho 66 is now in Junction. Progress is 36%, heading to Ortesia. Mr. Johnny B is now in Diamond. Progress is 36%, heading to Socorro. Site Black is now in Diamond. Progress is 36%, heading to Socorro.
Tune in Sunday at 6 on Public Radio 89.5 KWGS.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by Topeka Coffee Roasters, a farm-direct coffee company committed to a sustainable and ethical coffee future, from their farms in El Salvador to their cafes in Tulsa. More about their mission and roasted-to-order coffee at topekacoffee.com.
Made possible by your financial support. Public Radio 89.5 KWGS HD1 Tulsa.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Workday. Workday is an AI platform for forward thinkers dedicated to transforming the way business leaders manage people, money, and agents today so they can transform tomorrow. Workday, moving business forever forward. And from the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public
Bangladesh is now in Boise. Progress is 5%, heading to Corpus Christi.
in the 21st
Ras
century.
Cooler
This
from
is
Serbia joined the server. Driver rank is 187.
Ranjay Gulati is a behavioral scientist at Harvard Business School. He has seen examples of courage and cowardice in his own life and in stories drawn from the news. When he sees stories of people acting courageously, he asks himself, what allowed these people to live up to their values, to stand up for what's right? Ranjay, a few years ago, a question started to nag at you, and you decided to investigate it scientifically. What was this question?
The question really was, how do people operate in the face of uncertainty? Risk is where you have tools to assess, quantify,
has just
mitigate.
completed a job to New
Uncertainty is
Orleans
like
in 1 hour, 32 minutes and 37 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. DJTNHN is now number 21 on the leaderboard. Arsha Point 26 is now in Albuquerque. Progress is 51%, heading to Reading. Anabu 8991 is now in Ben Horn. Progress is 12%, heading to San Diego.
People say fight or flight. It's actually fight, flight, or freeze. And fight is the rarest of all. It's mostly flight or freeze. I have no scientific basis for this, but I would like to hypothesize that most of us are descendants of cowards. Our ancestors, the ones who made it, ran for cover. The ones who ran after danger didn't quite make it. Now, at the same time, humankind has only progressed by virtue of those few, the daring few, the Wright brothers risking their lives. You say, I'm going to give it to Trump.
Rubber Duck is now in Miles City. Progress is 11%, heading to Butte.
Whether it was Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, all these people put themselves at risk. We are all the beneficiaries of those bold actions.
Sean 1391 is now in Twin Falls. Progress is 31%, heading to Cheyenne.
That from ancient times, people have puzzled over why some of us are braver than others, and one school of thought has held that bravery is just something that is innate in some people. Some people just happen to be brave.
This is a real question, because as I looked at the biographies of some of these people, you read Mahatma Gandhi, he was not always a courageous person. Then early in his life, he was trying to be a barrister. He was living in England. He wanted to be more English than the English, right? And then he had a moment of realization that changed things for him. He was a horrible public speaker. He was absolutely frightened of speaking in public. Here you have somebody who then speaks to millions of people. So you start to see that some of these people actually conflict. And you discover that courage is a choice. It's a choice you make. And it's a choice you make in the face of it forces you to become acquainted with the discomfort we feel when we are scared.
Let's examine some of the things that courageous people do. You say that they construct the right kind of narrative. What are these narratives and why are they important, Ranjay?
So, Max Weber, a famous sociologist in the last century, talked about how human behavior can either be rational, which is looking at all the options and trying to evaluate those choices, or interpretive.
Be more careful.
Interpretive
is now
is
in
where
Thompson
you're looking
Falls.
at
Progress is
through a lens of
65%. Heading to Great Falls.
What does it mean for me? What is the meaning of the situation? So this narrative is how we construct a story about the situation. What's going on here? Is it personally meaningful to me? And a story we construct of ourselves in that situation. And most times this interpretive calculus takes us to freeze or flight. Sometimes we feel compelled. I have to do something. This situation is the moment where if I don't do it, I can't live with myself.
One of the stories that you say can support our efforts to be courageous is what you call a moral quest. Talk about this idea. You've mentioned Mahatma Gandhi, you've mentioned Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr. All of them, it would seem, were not just on a political journey, but on a moral journey of some kind.
I think most of us inside ourselves want to be great at something. I want to be somebody. I want to be known for something. And when you encounter something that you
Buick Cox 50 is now in Stockton. Progress is 42%. Heading to Modesto.
feel a sense of
P-Viper 2010 is now in Stockton. Progress is 42%. Heading to Modesto.
I wrote a book called Deepcool, which I looked at even startups. They start not only with an idea. They usually start with an ideal. We're going to change the way this thing gets done.
AMD 8991 is now in El Paso. Progress is 25%. Heading to San Diego.
Energizes me. They lose it, and then they're like, oh my God, we
Progress
lost
is
our soul.
49%. Heading to
I remember
Socorro.
speaking 2 years ago with Scott Atrin. He studies extremist groups and violent movements and so forth. But one of the things he looks at is this idea that, all of us are motivated, of course, by, costs and benefits. We are making cost-benefit calculations as we go through life. In some ways, I think that's what you're talking about when you talk about having a moral quest. In some ways, it moves the conversation from a cost-benefit calculation to something that in some ways is beyond.
Absolutely. But I don't want to make the distinction so clear. I think we're doing cost-benefit while we are also doing these other factors.
Stereo Virus 219 is now in Stockton. Progress is 42%.
Right?
Heading to Modesto.
I don't know. My mother's no longer here, but I'm not
Mr.
sure
Johnny
if
B
the guy had already
is now in
pointed the gun
Dalhart.
and had his finger on the
Progress is
trigger, then she would have
49%. Heading to
worked
Socorro.
around it, right? I would imagine that she's, in her mind, she must have decided that if I had a moment, it's now or never.
Be more careful is now in
And as she
Missoula.
explained,
Progress
she
is
said he was
74%.
determined to get my
Heading to Great Falls.
He had said clearly his intention was, I'm not leaving him without his signature. So his next move would have been to actually pull that gun out. Right? He had just shown it. So in some ways it was a brilliant preemptive move. So these ideas kind of...
Psycho 66 is now in Fort Stockton. Progress is 67%. Heading to
There is
Ortiza.
an emotional process that are coming together. And hopefully they intersect, or sometimes what I found is emotional trumps. I'm going to do this no matter what. I don't care. That's where it goes to another world.
Volvo-Vostok, Bangladesh, has been caught speeding by Idaho Highway Patrol. Speed was 76 miles per hour. Penalty is $15. Duicox 50 is now in Modesto. Progress is 84%. Heading to Modesto.
Here's a bit of what she said.
P-Viper 2010 is now in Modesto. Progress is 82%.
I joined Facebook
heading to Modesto.
Facebook has the potential to bring out the best in us. But I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people.
So Ranjay, it must have taken considerable courage for Frances Haugen to stand up to a behemoth like Facebook. She wasn't just walking away from a job, she was walking away from her career, from coworkers, from friends. You say that she embedded her actions in a moral quest?
Absolutely. I think, for her, having seen firsthand one of her own friends getting radicalized by content on Facebook, she felt it was not an abstraction anymore. And I think that brought her to a point where she felt she had to do something, that doing nothing was not an option. We had this notion of the lone hero best in courage. She didn't do it alone. She pondered it for several months.
Anabu 8991 is now in Las Cruces. Progress is 32%. Heading to San Diego. Shaw 1391 is now in Logan. Progress is 49%. Heading to Cheyenne.
You curate the right kind of support. She got emotional support from her parents and friends. She got informational or knowledge support from a law firm that specialized in helping whistleblowers. She got resource support from news media that was going to cover her story. And she got
Stereovirus 219 is now in Modesto. Progress is 82%. Heading to Modesto.
She was doing or not doing and whether it felt right or not. So, there was this multitude of support that, along with her own sense of morality, that brought her to the point where she felt
Mark the Shark from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, joined the server. Driver rank is 9.
The stories we tell ourselves about our capacities, but we also need to gather information about what's out there.
Shaw 1391 is now in Ogden. Progress is 51%. Heading to Cheyenne. Rubber Duck is now in Billings. Progress is 47%. Heading to Butte.
The moral fervor and identity and needing to move you into wanting to do something. People resource themselves in a variety of ways. They have a set of a toolkit and tactics there. So one of the first ones I discovered was sense making. Sense making is a classic term used by a very famous organization theorist from Michigan named Carl White. And Carl White looked at firefighters. When a firefighter goes in, they don't know. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. How fast is the fire happening? How combustible is it? Are there other kind of combustible liquids in the building? Are there people in the building who need to be saved? How much time do I have before I need to make a hasty exit? All this is going. Now, if you're going to do your risk-adjusted calculation over here, you're never going to go into it. They don't have that option. So they go to the building with an initial hypothesis. They've seen the building structure. They know how long the fire has been going on. They have a guess as to point of origin. And looking around, cues. What's here? What's there? Updating your theory. Taking some more steps. Should I be going upstairs to look for people? Should I go into the basement? Should I look for point of origin? What should I be doing? So it's a story of kind of tippy-toeing your way into the fog. What is called acting your way into knowing. Rather than knowing before acting, sometimes you have to act your way into knowing.
Rubber Duck is now in Laurel. Progress is 55%. Heading to Butte.
You say that a masterful example of acting your way into knowing took place in the wake of the major tsunami that hit Japan
Sharky
in
Dam 3ING has started a job from Seattle going to Dallas. Pay is $1,270. Site Black is now in Tucumcari. Progress is 63%. Heading to Socorro.
Complex called Daini. This too was damaged equally badly. Both of them had a boundary wall of 20 feet high, and the tsunami had crossed 55 feet. It had submerged the nuclear reactors, the cooling system, and everything else. And all these people, the 300 odd employees, had
Raft Cooler from Serbia joined the server. Driver rank is 187.
A power plant like that works off of gauges, sensors and gauges, all gone. And in there is the plant manager, Masuda. Mr. Masuda says, what are we going to do? Headquarters says, we don't know. They don't know. This is okay. We got 5 volunteers to go outside and do a recce tour. Find out how bad our things. They go out and they find out where the power supply in the cooling system is gone. There is no other immediate source of power we can get. So we need to get power back somehow into our system.
Volvo Ghostof Bangladesh has been caught speeding by Utah Highway Patrol. Speed was 85 miles per hour. Penalty is $150. Mr. Johnny B is now in Tucumcari. Progress is 64%. Heading to Socorro.
Cables to create a little extension cord, if I may say. So now you're trying to grapple with
Anabu
the
8991 is now in San Simon. Progress is 46%. Heading to San Diego.
Nearest reactor where the power source is. They start to do that when they discover another reactor has suddenly the temperature is rising much faster. They call GE and say all these reactors were the same model. Why is this one who were heating up much faster? They come back and say,
Sharky Dam 3ING is now in Seattle. Progress is 0%. Heading to Dallas.
That's why it's probably heating up faster.
P-Viper 2010 has just completed a job to Modesto in 20 minutes and 40 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. P-Viper 2010 is now number 166 on the leaderboard. Sean 1391 is now in Evanston. Progress is 57%. Heading to Cheyenne. Volvo Ghostof Bangladesh is now in Ogden. Progress is 21%. Heading to Corpus Christi. Blood Baron 66 from United States joined the server. Driver rank is 187.
To risk. And you said that one person who pulled this off in 1974 was a man named Philippe Petit. What did he do?
He's a tightrope walker. A daredevil, if you may say so. And, at that time he walked between the World Trade Center buildings.
Cox 50 has just completed a job to Modesto in 23 minutes and 0 seconds. P-Viper 2010 set the best time for this job. Dewey Cox 50 is now number 28 on the leaderboard.
I don't see myself like that. I am a very, very methodical, very calculating, very careful. So what you are seeing as completely reckless.
Mark the Shark has started a job from Laredo, going to Houston. Pay is $234. Volvo Ghostof Bangladesh has been caught speeding by Utah Highway Patrol. Speed was 84 miles per hour. Penalty is $135.
Behavior is actually very, very well thought out.
In other words, it's very tightly controlled. At one point, Philip says, if I think I'm a hero who is invincible, I will pay for it with my life. So in other words, he understands that if he actually goes outside the realm of what he is tightly prepared for, if he goes off script, if you will, that's exactly when very bad things happen.
Now, take another example, which is of heroic behavior, is Tom Cruise, who does most of his own stunts. In fact, he drove a motorcycle off of a cliff and then parachuted into the valley. And he did it 6 times till he got it. And when asked, Tom, aren't you scared doing this? And he says, things. One is, he says, yes, I'm afraid, but I'm okay and comfortable being afraid. That's the first thing. So he's tamed and managed his own fear.
Global Vostok Bangladesh is now in Provo. Progress is 25%. Heading to Corpus Christi.
Right? How they've trained up for this, how they've simulated and planned for this. This is not just Tom finding a random cliff and saying, let's just race off.
Stereovirus 219 has just completed a job to Modesto in 22 minutes and 22 seconds. P-Viper 2010 set the best time for this job. Stereovirus 219 is now number 148 on the leaderboard. Psycho 66 is now in Carlsbad. Progress is 91%. Heading to Ortesia.
In order to become brave, we need to tell inspiring stories about ourselves and our journeys.
Progress is 89%.
We also need to learn about the nature of the frightening or daunting challenges we face, and to deliberately test our abilities to deal with them. When we come back, the role of the psychological factor known as self-efficacy. You're listening to Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedant. This is NPR.
As a parent, managing a digital world of smartphones,
Rubber Duck
social
is
media,
now in
and virtual
Bozeman.
reality
Progress is
can feel
87%.
The issue of
Heading to
screen
Butte.
time is not that screen time is inherently toxic so much as what we are not doing because we're on a screen.
I'm Sarah McCammon. We'll take a deep dive into all things doom scrolling and screen time on All Things Considered from NPR News.
This afternoon at 4 on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for Tulsa is provided by Topeka Coffee Roasters, a farm-direct coffee company committed to a sustainable and ethical coffee future. From their farms in El Salvador to their cafes in Tulsa. More about their mission and roasted-to-order coffee at topekacoffee.com.
Loco from British Columbia, Canada, joined the server. Driver rank is 1.
Public Radio 89.5, AWGS HD1.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Imaginable Futures, envisioning a future where learning sparks opportunity and thriving belongs to everyone. Learn more at imaginablefutures.com.
继续执行
From the Doris Duke Foundation, which aims to support the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. And from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org.
This is Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedantam. Have you had times in your life when you found yourself unable to do the brave thing? When you shrank back from a challenge and failed to live up to your values?
Progress is 99%.
Or can you think of a moment when
Heading
you were
to
frightened
Ortesia.
but somehow managed to be brave? If you have a personal story you'd be willing to share with the Hidden Brain audience, or a question or comment about this episode about the science of bravery, please find a very quiet room and record a voice memo. 2 or 3 minutes is plenty. Then email the file to us at feedback@hiddenbrain.org. Use the subject line, frightening. Again, that's feedback@hiddenbrain.org. At a commencement address some years ago, the writer and civil rights activist Maya Angelou said, "You can be kind and true and fair and generous and just and even merciful, occasionally. But to be that thing, time after time, you have to really have courage." Ranjay Kuladi is a behavioral scientist at Harvard Business School. He's the author of How to Be Bold, The Surprising Science of Everyday Courage. Ranjay, in your studies of courageous people, you found that they deliberately cultivate a capacity known as self-efficacy. What is self-efficacy? How does people become braver?
Anabu 8991 is now in Tucson. Progress is 60%. Heading to San Diego.
Was trying to convince people on stake. And what is interesting is, in that study and several others that he did, he makes a very important distinction between the domain-specific efficacy that you may have and then a generalized efficacy. Domain-specific is, I am the master of my craft. I know my task, I'll do it, I'll get it done. Generalized efficacy is this general notion, I got it, bring it on. Captain Sullenberger landing the plane on the Hudson.
Rubber duck is now in view. Progress is 90%. Heading to view. Psycho 66 has just completed a job to Artesia in 47 minutes and 34 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Psycho 66 is now number 5 on the leaderboard. Loco has started a job from Seattle, going to Albuquerque. Pay is $909.
That kind of confidence, if I can call it that, which is this generalized canvas, but that becomes the kernel of what allows us to then ultimately take bold action, even in the face of it.
Local Ghostof Bangladesh is now in price. Progress is 29%. Heading to Corpus Christi.
A designer, she must have been very good at her craft. But clearly she also had a higher level sense of self-efficacy, because she said, even when I'm confronting somebody who shows up at my house with a gun,
is now in Great Falls. Progress is 98%. Heading to Great Falls.
I should say most, but many entrepreneurs have that general sensibility, because you know, things are changing so fast around them, and the curveballs coming at them are so many from so many directions.
Mr. Johnny B is now in Albuquerque. Progress is 88%. Heading to Socorro. Site Black is now in Albuquerque. Progress is 88%. Heading to Socorro.
How do we cultivate them? That's the question.
And what is the answer to that question? Because again, I think people might say some people just have it, some people don't. But I think your theory is that in fact this is something that can be grown, can be cultivated.
Look, it starts with domain-specific efficacy, first of all. You have to be the master of your craft. You have to really understand your craft in a way that nobody else does. It should be deeply internalized in you. Then when you go beyond that, I find you can take yourself so far, but sometimes you need external validation. What do coaches do so well for teams? You know, what do? They help the player believe in themselves, like self-belief. I know you got it. And I think that becomes part of the story. So you're looking for external sources of validation as well. And then when you're playing...
Rascooler from Serbia joined the server. Driver rank is 187.
I got it, I can do it. This self-belief sometimes comes from within and sometimes comes from an externalized source. Also
a very dramatic example of how domain-specific self-efficacy can lead to generalized self-efficacy
is now in Yakima. Progress is 6%. Heading to Dallas. Steel 10 is now in Tonopah. Progress is 50%. Heading to Ely.
So several terrorists found their way into the hotel and laid a siege on the
Dutchman from Grand Rapids, Michigan, United States, joined the server. Driver rank is 69. Loco is now in Tacoma. Progress is 0%. Heading to Albuquerque.
And meanwhile, there was no way for
Loco is now in Seattle. Progress is 0%. Heading to Albuquerque. Site Black is now in Socorro. Progress is 95%. Heading to Socorro. Mr. Johnny B is now in Socorro. Progress is 95%. Heading to Socorro. Sergio Transportes is now in Kalispell. Progress is 50%. Heading to Portland.
Were calling and trying to get help. And so they all went back into it. But the story I think best exemplifies this is Malika Jaggi, 24 years old. She's been assigned an event to welcome the new CEO of Global Motherboard. And there is a farewell for the departing CEO. And the global leadership of Unilever is there, including the Indian leadership as well. And she's in charge of this event. And now you have the CEO. She comes to the doors. Tells everybody saying, "I'm okay." Makes them lie down on the floor. This goes on the whole night. Right? charge. She's the, as she explained later, she was the youngest in the group. She was in charge. And no, there's no script for this, right? She's now working way beyond script. All her script is take care of the guest, and the purpose statement in the Taj is the guest is called. Atithi Deva Bhava, which means the guest is called. And that's all she can think of. And then early hours of the morning, there's a fire lit outside of the home.
Space Ghost from Brazil joined the server. Driver rank is 4. Mark the Shark is now in San Antonio. Progress is 28%. Heading to Houston.
The windows, which are big, thick windows. They use chairs and manage to break one of the windows. They see the general manager down there. They wave to him. He sees them. He sees the smoke coming out. He directs the firefighters there. A ladder is put. Malika makes the guests get on first. She's the last. Now you ask yourself, what training?
Be more careful. Has just completed a job to Great Falls in 1 hour, 16 minutes, and 52 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Be more careful is now number 31 on the leaderboard. Sharkygam 3ing has left the server with an active job. Job cancelled. $150 penalty applied.
So Ranjay, we've been talking about very rational and deliberate approaches to cultivate courage. But you also write about a different path to becoming braver, and that is calling upon our faith. What have you discovered about the link between
Mobile Ghostof Bangladesh is now in Moab. Progress is 34%. Heading to Corpus Christi.
Weather uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty, and for the longest time we have believed in a higher power, a higher source, something bigger than us is there to take care of it. Now, I don't want to debate right now whether there is a force or not. We can have a long discussion about that. But at the minimum,
Space Ghost has started a job from Thailand going to Dodge City. Pay is $320. Dutchman has started a job from Laramie going to Salt Lake City. Pay is $252.
Knowing that I'm supported by this higher force gives me the comfort, confidence, the belief that, you know what, it looks dangerous, it looks scary, but
Sean 1391 is now in Rock Springs. Progress is 68%. Heading to Cheyenne. Mendes from Sao Paulo, Brazil, joined the server. Driver rank is 187.
With great courage. Tell me his story.
So here's a firefighter who is in Idaho fighting a forest fire. And on day one, the fire looks pretty
Mr. Johnny B has just completed a job to Socorro in 51 minutes and 19 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Mr. Johnny B is now number 86 on the leaderboard. P-Viper 2010 has started a job from Kingman going to Los Angeles. Pay is $207.
He's holding on to his rosary because he believes that if he has the rosary, he'll be protected. And he's praying, and magically, just soon after, a helicopter comes and dumps a bunch of water on them and douses the fire. And in his mind, this was just another manifestation of this higher power that was there for him. In his mind, he believes firmly that with this rosary, he'll always be safe.
So you told me at the start of our conversation, Ranjay, that you yourself have always been a very cautious person, a very deliberate person. You think about the risks before you embark on something. Have you,
Rubber
after all of
Duck
this,
has quit
studied
the job.
about the science of bravery?
Penalty
Have you tried
applied.
to take it upon yourself to become a braver person?
You know, I think that moment with my mother probably haunted me more than I would like to admit. But I actually, after I actually decided I was going to try and put myself in situations that made me uncomfortable. So very early when I came to the US, I went to flight school to learn how to fly a plane. I never told my parents about that. But off I went to fly. And it was okay as long as I had an instructor next to me, and you're okay flying, and it's and he showed us that you can glide the plane if the engine shuts off.
Has just completed a job to Socorro in 52 minutes and 33 seconds. Mr. Johnny B said the best time for this job, Site Black, is now number 21 on the leaderboard. Anabu 8991 is now in Yuma. Progress is 87%. Heading to San Diego. Deercock 50 has started a job from Kingman, going to Los Angeles. Pay is $207. There are 2 drivers on this job.
Props are up, taking off, calling ground control. I'm talking to Jerry, and here I was, talking my way through the flight. I needed to comfort myself. I came to realize, that fear is natural. I had gotten over the shame of it. That was very important. That for me, the first step was the shame I felt when I felt scared. I needed to overcome that. Now I have overcome the shame. Now I had to figure out how to tame my fear. Right? And I'm trying to find a way to tame my fear. And then I have to take it to the next level.
Mark the Shark has left the server with an active job. Job canceled. $150 penalty applied.
Cross that chasm from shame, pain, to really transcend. And that was my first foray. I did another thing as well. I also then realized that I was not too comfortable.
Pablo has started a job from Kingman, going to Los Angeles. Pay is $207.
Off I went.
There are 3 drivers on this job.
Several summers with stuff. And again, not the most comfortable thing for me when I first started it, but I was determined to show myself. It wasn't to show my mother. My mother didn't even know most of these things were happening. But I was determined to show myself that I could do it.
Ranjay Gulati is a behavioral scientist at Harvard Business School. He's the author of How to Be Bold, the surprising science of everyday courage. Ranjay, thank you so much for joining me today on Hidden Brain.
Thank you, Shankar. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
If you have a question or a personal story about courage that you'd be willing to share with the Hidden Brain audience, please find a very quiet room and record a voice memo. 2 or 3 minutes is plenty. Then email the file to us at feedback@hiddenbrain.org. Use the subject line, frightened. Again, that's feedback@hiddenbrain.org. Hidden Brain is produced by Hidden Brain Media. Our audio production team includes Annie Murphy-Paul, Kristen Wong, Laura Querelle, Ryan Katz, Autumn Barnes, Andrew Chadwick, and Nick Woodbury. Tara Boyle is our executive producer. I'm Hidden Brain's executive editor. If you missed any part of today's show, you can find it on the Hidden Brain podcast feed or at hiddenbrain.org. It's the episode titled Cultivating Courage. Next week in our YouTube Pointer series, how to get going again when you're stuck in a rut.
93%.
In any pursuit, it
Heading
doesn't
to
really
San
matter what you're
Diego.
doing, but trying
Mark
multiple
the Shark
approaches,
from Toronto,
experimenting,
Ontario,
figuring
Canada,
out whether the
joined
dominant
the server.
approach is the right
Driver
one or whether you
rank
should try
is
something a bit
11.
different is the way forward.
I'm Shankar Vedantam.
Steel
See you
10
soon.
is now in Ely. Progress is 91%. Heading to Ely. Loco is now in Yakima. Progress is 7%. Heading to Albuquerque.
It's a double. The letter you circled, does it appear in the name more than once?
Yes, it does.
I think you circled an L. Is that the letter you just circled right there?
It is the letter I circled, yes.
And I thought it was going to be somebody. At first, I'm thinking a name that's very common. I thought it was going to be something like Leslie, but it's not.
No.
It's somebody I think it's a family. Ellen. Is her name Ellen?
Yes, that is. I'm going to show it to Kate. You're here. Kate's my producer. We'll just put her on the microphone as well.
Yes, I can confirm it was Ellen.
I think we should all meet Ellen now, don't you? Anyway, that was Sean Lay talking to Oz Perlman. You've been listening to NewsHour. Thanks, and talk to you soon.
Houston Public Media, in partnership with Texas Southern University, brings to you The Vibe. R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul. Music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
When ChatGPT came out a few years ago, many students saw an opportunity.
It just writes it for you, and it's really good. You guys should try it.
And their teachers could tell.
You can pick it out almost instantly.
Generative AI crashed the party in education, and schools are still scrambling to adjust.
It's gone downhill really quickly.
MIT's Teach Lab presents The Homework Machine, a series about K-12 education in the age of artificial intelligence.
Sunday night at 9 p.m. on News 88.7. Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
In Tehran, protesters have been chanting slogans calling for the end of the Iranian regime. Activists say hundreds have been killed and thousands detained this weekend. For Sunday, January 11th, it's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Sarah McCammon. Later, Stephen Miller is not an elected official, but few people have more power in America today.
A lot of the controversial policies coming out of the administration are either being dreamed up by Stephen Miller
from Ontario,
or executed
Canada,
by Stephen Miller.
A closer look at the man behind many of President Trump's key policies, and remembering Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead.
We've been more or less accepted into the American musical tradition, which is where we've always been.
But first, the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. As anti-government protests continue in Iran, President Trump has vowed to support the country's peaceful demonstrations, saying that the U.S. would take military action against the Islamic Republic if it killed protesters. But as NPR's Elena Moore reports, that threat of strikes has some Republicans on Capitol Hill concerned.
In an interview with ABC News, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky argued that if Trump attacks Iran to support protesters, it could end up backfiring.
So when you bomb a country, then people tend to rally around their own flag. They tend to see this is a foreign country coming in and bombing us.
He also said the U.S. shouldn't be, quote, involved with every freedom movement around the world, and that a president is required to talk to Congress before ordering strikes on another country. Paul is one of a handful of GOP lawmakers who have recently urged Trump to consult Congress before taking military action in global conflicts. Elena Moore, NPR News.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem tells CNN that Minneapolis's police chief and its mayor have, quote, politicized the federal deployment and inflamed the public into the ICE shooting that was pretty good last week. Mayor Jacob Fry says Noem is making the city far less safe.
I think it's a fair point to say, well, these ICE agents are being put in a horrible position because they're asked to do things that are not legal or are unconstitutional. But here's the thing, they're still doing them, and we are still dealing with the repercussions here in this city.
Speaking there on CNN's State of the Union, Good's death has sparked protests around the country. Meanwhile, Noem tells Fox News that hundreds more agents will be sent to Minnesota over a years-long federal investigation into a welfare fraud scandal linked to the Somali community in the state. She also issued new guidelines for immigration facilities limiting congressional visits. This after Minnesota Democratic lawmakers were denied entry to a facility yesterday. Wall Street gets a new round of corporate report cards this week, starting with the country's biggest banks. NPR's Maria Aspen reports investors will be watching for more clues about consumer spending and the overall economy.
JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs are among the companies kicking off earnings season by releasing their financial results for the end of last year. These banks do business with companies and people across America, meaning that they have a pretty good window into how their customers are feeling about the economy. Investors will be looking for signs that businesses and consumers are continuing to spend money, despite growing concerns about the labor market. Employers are continuing to slow down on hiring, according to the latest government data, which showed that last year was the weakest for job growth since the pandemic. Maria Aspen, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. 2 people have been
Sonic
arrested in
has
Kenya
started a job
for
from
allegedly
McAllister,
poisoning to
going to
death 6
Shreveport.
lions
Pay is
inside a popular national park along the
$151.
Kenya-Tanzania border.
Loco is
Police
now
say
in
the motive
Pendleton.
isn't clear,
Progress
but
is
there's been a surge in
15%.
human-wildlife
Albuquerque.
conflict across Kenya
Sergio
and
Transport
Tanzania in
is
recent
now in
months.
Sandpoint.
Emmanuel
Progress
Gunza
is
has more.
60%.
Kenya
Heading
wildlife
to
officials
Portland.
say the 6 lions and 34 vultures died inside Amboseli National Park after feeding on cow carcass deliberately laced with poison. The killing of
Now in
wildlife
Rock
and
Springs.
poaching are considered
Progress
serious
is
crimes,
40%.
with offenders facing
Heading to
20 years
Salt
in
Lake
jail
City.
or fines of up to $120,000. Kenya saw a surge in human-wildlife conflict last year, with more than 44 people killed, including 8 trampled by a herd of elephants last month. Environmentalists say the increased interaction is due to a severe drought that has pushed wild animals into residential areas and urbanization that has seen cities encroach into national parks and forests. For NPR News, I'm Emmanuel Gunza in Nairobi, Kenya.
At the weekend box office, Avatar, Fire and Ash took the top spot for the 4th week in a row with an estimated $21 million in ticket sales. So far, the film, the 3rd chapter in James Cameron's Pandora epic, has made $888 million worldwide. In second place, Paramount's rampaging chimp horror film, Primate, with $11.3 million. But in a close 3rd place, the thriller The Housemaid, with $11.2 million in estimated ticket sales. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation. Luminescence Foundation is dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives. This is NPR.
Hi, I'm John Donvan, host of Open to Debate, where we bring you open-minded discussions and debates about the issues affecting our lives. Everything from science and tech to politics, culture, and foreign policy. In our divided nation, we feel it's more important than ever for people to be open to disagreement, and open to listening to the other side. Join me in being open to debate.
Selfless has left the server with an active job.
Sunday
Job
night at 10
canceled.
p.m. on News 88.7.
$150 penalty applied. Space Ghost is now in Ardmore. Progress is 35%.
Protests in Iran are entering a
Heading
third
to
week,
Dodge City.
spreading across cities and towns nationwide. Tight internet restrictions make it difficult for people outside the country to fully grasp the scale of demonstrations, but the few verified images that are emerging plainly show the fury on the streets. International journalists are currently barred from entering Iran, but from London, we're joined now by Willem Marks, who's been analyzing videos shared by ordinary citizens alongside coverage from Iranian state media. Hi, Willem.
Hey, Sarah.
What do we know so far about these protests? What might have sparked them, and what is the scale of these demonstrations?
Well, this unrest in Iran, it really reached its 2-week mark this weekend. There's this deepening government crackdown on these very widespread anti-government demonstrations. And the protests originally began in late December with shopkeepers and traders in Tehran, that's the capital's Grand Bazaar. They essentially shut their shops to protest price rises and a collapse in the country's currency. But they've since spread across the country, these protests. Activists reporting that the death toll has climbed sharply, with hundreds of protesters now believed to be dead, thousands detained in clashes between these demonstrators and security forces. And protesters are not just demanding economic relief anymore. Many are chanting anti-government slogans. There are reports of clashes in cities including Tehran, Mashhad, and elsewhere, as the demonstrations become really the biggest domestic challenge to Iran's theocratic leadership in years.
And how is the regime responding?
Well, the government's not released their own official figures on deaths or injuries or arrests. They have said that dozens of police have been killed in these clashes. There's been a pretty unprecedented communications blackout, though, with the internet cut alongside phone access. That makes all the independent verification very difficult. But speaking on Iranian state television, the country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, said he would listen to protesters' demands. He's saying here that authorities request that in every neighborhood, residents come together and not let other people riot. If citizens have a concern, he says, we will hear them, it's our duty to hear them and to solve their problems. But he says our highest duty is to not allow rioters to come and disrupt society. He blames
Sergio
foreign governments,
Transportes is
specifically the
now in
United States and
Cordele.
Israel, for
Progress
stirring up the
is
protests.
64%.
And the Iranian
Heading to
parliament
Portland.
speaker even warned Israel and American bases in the region would be, quote, legitimate targets if the US attacked Iran. And remember that Iran attacked both Israel and US military installations
now
just
in
last
Oklahoma
month.
City.
Right, and President
Progress
Trump
is
has threatened
49%.
military action
Heading to
against
Dodge
the
City.
Iranian regime. Willem, how could the U.S. intervene, and what could that mean?
Well, the situation is really, really volatile. The protests began with these economic grievances. They've now evolved into much broader political dissent against the regime. The international responses, including some pretty vocal support signals from US leaders, including President Trump, for the demonstrators, and including warnings against further bloodshed, have really heightened the tensions inside Iran. And this is happening just days after that whirlwind series of events in Venezuela. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times reported today that President Trump was set to be briefed this week on specific options to respond to these protests in Iran. So what happens next really depends on whether authorities in Tehran can contain the unrest without too much further violence, and whether protesters can sustain momentum amid all this repression and the limited communication channels.
Willem, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Today, Hamas said it would dissolve its existing government in Gaza as soon as a Palestinian technocratic committee created by President Trump's peace plan takes over the region. But there's no timeline for when that committee will actually take over. In fact, 3 months after Trump unveiled his plan, the ceasefire is still stuck in its first phase. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports on what's holding things up.
In Gaza City, the war does not feel like it's over for Siraj al-Najjar. Our producer, Anas Baba, met him at one of the new eateries that's popped up ever since Israel partially eased its blockade.
ناكل عشان زمان ما كلنا اصلا متوحشين وخايفين من كل شيء.
We're eating because we haven't eaten like this in a long time, says al-Najjar, a carpenter. We're craving, but also scared of everything. We don't feel like this war has ended. There's an uneasy feeling among some in Israel, too. Nimrod Novik of the Israel Policy Forum is part of a group of former national security officials dedicated to ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Kinetic activity continues. Palestinians are being killed. Israelis too, on occasion. And Hamas is reasserting itself on behalf of Gaza that it controls.
He believes that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to move the peace process forward. It's an election year, and Netanyahu is beholden to right-wing ministers who would prefer to recolonize Gaza and annex the West Bank. And President Trump's envoys are busy trying to solve other world problems.
There's no rush on Israel's part because right now it has the security control it probably feels most comfortable with.
That's Lucy Kurtzer-Ellenbogen of the Middle East Institute in Washington. She says Hamas, too, doesn't have much of an incentive, even though more than 440 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire went into effect, according to Gaza health officials.
For Hamas, kicking the can a little bit and buying time is probably something they have no problem with. In the meantime, they can rebuild, they can regroup.
But Trump's envoys and Arab mediators seem to want to show some progress and are expected this week to announce what President Trump is calling his Board of Peace. They'll also name a group of Palestinian technocrats to administer Gaza, and a former UN envoy, Nikolai Mladenov, will be a key player in all of this. Kurtzer-Ellenbogen says Mladenov pulled off something quite rare in the Middle East when he was UN envoy. He won the trust of both Israelis and Palestinians. But she says implementing Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza is a mammoth task.
This is a lot of work to be done by sort of a handful of technocrats and the very talented, certainly Nikolai Mladenov, who knows this file like the back of his hand. But again, a lot more will need to be done to start seeing anything that looks like meaningful progress on the ground.
Nimrod Novik agrees, describing the Trump administration's approach in real estate terms.
The administration seems to be prepared to announce the construction of the penthouse without worrying about foundations, ground floor, second floor, and everything else that the penthouse is supposed to rest upon.
The international force for Gaza is still just a vision, he says, pointing out that Arab countries won't send troops if the goal is to confront and disarm Hamas. And he says the Israelis have an unrealistic view about disarmament. In other conflicts around the world, disarmament is a process that takes time. But Netanyahu's government wants that to be a first step. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Over the past decade, nearly 8 million Venezuelans have fled their country amid economic collapse and crisis, according to the UN, and hundreds of thousands have made new lives in Chile. But despite President Nicolas Maduro's removal, they're not booking their flights back to Venezuela yet, as John Bartlett reports.
As news of the US raid on Caracas broke last Saturday morning, the Venezuelan diaspora in Chile woke to jubilant cheers echoing between the tower blocks in the capital,
is now in Salt Lake City. Progress is 94%. Heading
Hundreds
to Salt Lake
headed to
City.
a park in the city centre to celebrate, embracing one another and chanting. But a week on, that initial euphoria has faded.
Soy Mari Montesinos, tengo 49 años.
Mary Montesinos is the Chile representative
Darius
of
Belpepa from United States joined the server. Driver rank is 187.
We meet at the white-tiled office block where she works as a real estate broker.
Y como a las 8 de la mañana, mi mamá, que se levanta muy temprano.
She says that her mother woke her up with a phone call to say Maduro had gone. My first reaction was to get up and head straight out into the streets, she says.
No es que uno le desee mal a alguien, pero
I don't wish ill on anyone, she says. But Maduro has done so much harm to our people. It was so emotional being out there, because we knew he would finally face justice.
tú lo que escuchabas eran personas con la esperanza de volver a Venezuela.
You could hear people already talking about returning to Venezuela.
Progress is 58%. Heading to Los
Chile's
Angeles.
government says 670,000 Venezuelans have fled economic collapse to seek refuge here, bringing their music, food, and culture with them. But many struggle with bureaucracy and discrimination, and over half are living without papers. And that's something that some politicians here have seized upon.
Como le decía, vamos a ser claro, el que entre ilegal.
In December, far-right José Antonio Cast won a landslide victory in Chile's presidential election by linking illegal migration to a crime wave in the country. It will be inaugurated in March and has repeatedly pledged to pursue, detain and deport illegal migrants.
Progress is 67%.
But with nostalgia for Venezuela heightened after the fall of Maduro, many here are already planning their return.
Progress is 82%. Heading to Los Angeles.
Yelicod Pacheco came to Chile in 2017 and runs a successful restaurant in Santiago, which has become a hub for the Venezuelan community.
Sintiendo que no estás en tu hogar.
You never quite feel at home here, Pacheco says. Although she has a baby daughter, she misses Venezuela and says that she wants to take everything she's learned back to her country, which she hopes to help rebuild.
Rhythm has started a job from Evanston, going to Denver. Pay is $269. Shaw 1391 has just completed a job to Cheyenne in 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 55 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Shaw 1391 is now number 2 on the leaderboard. Rhino is now in Barstow. Progress is 58%. Heading to Los Angeles.
For NPR News, I'm John Bartlett in Santiago, Chile.
All Things Considered from NPR News.
Hi, I'm Manoush Zamarodi, and our world is changing so fast. On the TED Radio Hour, we invite innovators, researchers, and activists to unpack those changes with us.
Just about all companies are becoming technology companies or technology-enabled companies.
Listen to the TED Radio Hour from NPR. NPR every week for conversations that will deepen your understanding of our changing world.
The TED Radio Hour, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
It's Maria Hinojosa, host of Latino USA. We all love great stories, and great stories are what we pride ourselves in delivering to you every week. Latino USA presents a mix of reporting on culture and politics, diverse voices, and coverage of current and emerging issues, featuring stories from the heart, stories that will make you think and maybe even inspire you. Listen to Latino USA from PRX.
Sundays at 7 p.m. on News 88.7.
I'm Janine Herbst with these headlines. In Iran, hundreds of protesters have been killed, thousands detained as the demonstrations spread around the country over economic issues. They've been going on for weeks as the Iranian government tries to suppress them. President Trump is vowing to support Iran's demonstrations, warning that the U.S. will hit Iran hard if it kills any of the protesters. Nearly 16,000 nurses could walk off the job in New York City tomorrow over pay, benefits, staffing, and workplace safety. The state's governor declared a state of emergency Friday and is urging both sides to work out a deal. And at the weekend box office, Avatar: Fire and Ash took the top spot for the fourth week with an estimated $21 million in ticket sales. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News. Support for NPR comes from this station and from Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. From the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, RWJF is a national philanthropy working toward a future where health is no longer a privilege but a right. Learn more at rwjf.org.
Dutchman has
and
just
from the
completed
sustaining
a job in
members
Salt Lake
of
City
this
in 29
NPR
minutes
station.
and 7 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job.
I'm Sarah McCann.
Is now number
This week, the
62
Supreme
on the
Court will hear
leaderboard.
arguments from two separate cases weighing the rights of transgender athletes. Little v. Hecox challenges Idaho's ban on trans athletes playing on women's and girls' sports teams. West Virginia v. BPJ challenges a similar ban in West Virginia. Kate Sawson covers LGBTQ issues for the nonprofit newsroom The
Sean
19th and has been following
started
these
a job
cases
from
closely.
Cheyenne,
They're
going
going
to
to give us a
Pendleton.
preview. Welcome.
Pay is
Thanks for having me.
So in essence, what are these two cases about?
So, conservatives have increasingly argued that transgender women and girls have an unfair advantage in sports, that their hormone levels make them stronger and faster, and for that reason they say trans women should be banned from competition. These two girls, Lindsay Hecox and Becky Pepper Jackson, were banned from playing sports in their respective states by these state bans, and 27 states have these bans. And now the question is, will the Supreme Court back these bans and find that they are constitutional or not?
Yeah, you just said more than 24 states have laws like this. So why these two cases? How did they make their way to the Supreme Court?
So
is now
Lindsay
in New Orleans.
Hecox is a student
Progress
at
is
Boise State
0%.
University.
Heading to
She
Houma.
tried out for her track and field team, and she didn't even make the team. She was on a
Stereovirus
club
219
team.
is
She was
now in
banned from
Haber.
that when the
Progress is
state passed
95%.
its ban.
Heading to
And so
Haber.
she sued,
Rhino
saying this is
has quit the
clearly
job.
not fair.
$100
She was not
penalty
shaking the spot of
applied.
anybody. And Becky Pepper Jackson is also an interesting case because she's a 15-year-old West Virginia student who transitioned before ever undergoing male puberty. So her state banned her, and they're saying it's so clear that she doesn't have an unfair advantage.
Isn't one of the concerns not just about taking spots on teams, but also a competitive advantage against their opponents, potential advantage?
Certainly, yes. But what we found is that the research just simply doesn't back this up. And in part because there is limited research. There's a 2021 study published in the Journal of Sports Medicine that found no basis in existing research for banning trans women from sports. And a 2021 study funded by the International Olympic Committee, published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, concluded that transgender women likely have several physical disadvantages compared with their cisgender peers. This is after medical transition. So there's very limited research, but the research that exists just doesn't support banning transgender women or girls at this point.
Now, these are not the first cases before the Supreme Court that have involved transgender issues. Based on what we've seen from the court before, what are you expecting to happen at this week's arguments?
You know, last June, the court ruled against transgender youth in the Scrimetti decision. It was a 6-3 decision against transgender youth getting access to gender-affirming care in that case. And based on that, a lot of advocates are expecting a similar 6-3 ruling against transgender athletes. And that likely takes us to a situation that we're looking at like Roe, where it goes back to states, and states continue to ban trans athletes on a state-by-state basis. And states that were friendly to trans people continue to be friendly to them, and states that were banning trans people continue to ban them. You know, the rest of the country from Canada will remain as it is, but I think the bigger implication that we would see is that having your Supreme Court come back and tell you again and again and again that your rights matter less than everybody else's is a really damaging thing for a lot of transgender individuals. We're seeing this low typical way
has just completed a job to Los Angeles in 32 minutes and 4 seconds.
Very, very slowly.
A new best time has been set for this job. P-Viper 2010 is now number 132 on the leaderboard.
And what is the impact?
Yeah, it's not known how many trans athletes are competing in grade schools, college, or even professional sports, but advocates have insisted that they represent a tiny fraction of competitors. NCAA President Charlie Baker in 2024 stated that out of 500,000 college athletes in the country, openly trans people accounted for less than 10 athletes. So we're talking about probably the handful of
143 on the leaderboard.
And what does it mean for these athletes
is now in Rock Springs. Progress is 19%. Heading to Denver.
Especially
Rhino
in grade schools
has started a job
or
from
even
Indio,
college
going
athletics.
to San Jose.
These are kids who
Pay
are
is
trying to join
$301.
and
The
be part
best
of
job time is
their
33 minutes and
extracurricular
40
activities.
seconds.
They're not
Set by
sincerely
February
out
38
to win
on
a
January
competition.
11th, 2026.
You know, we have cases of
Sergio
transgender people where they
Transportes
come
is now in
in fifth,
Wenatchee.
and
Progress
that
is
is
81%. Heading to Portland.
Transgender
Global
people
Dostok
have a right
Bangladesh
to
is
exist
now in
and live,
Albuquerque.
and transgender
Progress
women
is
have competed in sports for
54%.
decades.
Heading to
We're
Corpus
just now
Christi.
addressing the reality of it.
That was journalist
is now
Kate
in Nampa.
Salson. Thank you so
Progress
much
is
for your work.
30%.
Thank you for
Heading to Albuquerque.
Technology is shaping our lives, whether we like it or not. And for parents, managing a digital world of smartphones, social media, and virtual reality can feel overwhelming. That's how for Andrew Bracken. He's a journalist with San Diego public media station KPBS, and more importantly for this conversation, a parent. He started asking questions of medical experts, researchers, even kids about how growing up around screens is affecting childhood. And that led to his podcast, Screen Time. Andrew Bracken joins me now to talk more about it. Hi, Andrew, welcome.
Los Angeles
It's great to be here.
in 32 minutes and 24
So, Andrew,
seconds.
I'm also a parent.
Pablo
These
set the best
questions
time
about
for this job.
screen time, I think they plague every parent.
Is now number
You're
27
raising
on the
kids off the
leaderboard.
grid, and then you have other challenges, I'm sure. But
is now
tell
in
me more
Laramie.
about why you
Progress
decided
is
to delve into this
8%.
topic of
Heading to
screens and
Pendleton.
kids as a journalist.
Well, I mean, you kind of touched on it there, but I chalk it up to just feeling overwhelmed as a parent. Back in 2024, then U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, he issued a health advisory on parental stress. And if you dig into some of the research he cited, concerns around technology, social media use, screen use, they're near the top of the list of parents' concerns. And, couple that with just my own anecdotal experiences, it's just a subject, as you know, which just so often comes up, and something parents have really been struggling with.
Just sort of having kids, the world forces the issue because everybody's got screens, it seems like, and then you have to decide what to do when it comes to your own children. I'm almost afraid to ask this question.
Heading to Albuquerque.
What do the experts say? I mean, how
Progress is 96%.
I mean, I asked this question a lot and pretty quickly learned that may no longer be the best question on screens at this point, just due to how ubiquitous they are in our lives. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics, for years, they had daily screen time recommendations for kids, age 5 and up, about 2 hours a day. But about a decade ago, they abandoned it.
They gave up.
Yeah, basically. They're in homes. They're in our schools, right? it's really hard to have kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. They now recommend kind of developing a family media plan. But for kids growing up in this very digital world, a lot of advice focuses more on the types of content kids are experiencing and how they're using these devices. Time is a factor, but it's not the most important piece here. And that leads to a reframing of how we may want to think about issues around screens for kids. Here's Dr. Michael Rich, who's a pediatrician researcher from the Digital Wellness Lab at Boston Children's Hospital.
The issue of screen time is not so much that screen time is inherently toxic so much as what it displaces. What we are not doing because we're on a screen. We are not, taking a walk in the woods or having a conversation with our parents or doing our homework or, frankly, getting sleep and a decent meal. So I think that it's really more about how we use the screens. Obviously, the content of those screens is very important, but also the context of our use of them. When, where, and how we are using them that really makes a huge difference.
Which resonates for me as a mom who has definitely said, put that thing away, we're eating dinner. As you were doing this reporting, Andrew, was there anything that surprised you?
Oh, quite a bit. One thing that really surprised me is how big of a factor parent screen use plays into how kids use technology. There's this term technoference. It refers to parents being distracted by their devices in the presence of their kids and the impacts it's having on child development. And in speaking with young people, I heard about this quite a bit. Here is one former high school student from San Diego I spoke with last year. Her name is Jay Louis.
I think social media and technology is a concern with the younger generation. But over time, I do find my parents to also kind of dive into that rabbit hole. I always see my mom, she's always on TikTok and TikTok Live. So I feel like that's a reason why screen time isn't as addressed to me and my siblings.
Definitely, my ears were burning listening back to that, and that's a really common sentiment I heard a lot from young people, also some pediatricians and medical experts as well.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
From Toronto, Ontario,
as
Canada,
we're talking with those researchers and medical experts, what do they tell you practically here about what to do? How do we handle these questions about screen time and kids?
The number one thing that came up was sleep. The most common tip I heard was just removing those devices from the bedroom at night. That's like a real important point. There's, studies that show even if it's left on silent, if it's sitting next to you, it still impacts sleep. So buying an alarm box, is a huge one you'll hear a lot about. One more piece of advice that's really struck with me relates to screens and discipline. I spoke with Dr. Willow Jenkins. She's a child psychiatrist at Brady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And here's how she put it.
I see screens being used a lot as both a reward and as a punishment, and I think we have to be incredibly careful doing that, because then we are saying we value screens more than other activities, and we're sending that message that your screen time is more valuable than your reading time, your sports time, your social time.
There's evidence behind this. One researcher I spoke with, Dr. Jason Nagata from UC San Francisco, he published a study that found using screens as a reward or as a punishment actually led to increased screen use.
Take it away, Highway Patrol. Speed was 76 miles per hour.
The things you learned while working on the Screen Time podcast change your own
started a job from Los Angeles.
I wish I could say, I live in a doom-scrolling free home or something, but it's always a work in progress. It's definitely made me think a lot about my own technology use. So I'm really focused more on finding opportunities to better connect with my own kids, whether online or off, frankly. Playing games, connecting with tools they may want to use, and really driving home the importance of talking to our kids about the internet and all that it involves, and just how important that is.
There are 2 drivers
Andrew
on this
Brackett
job.
is the creator of the podcast Screen Time, which you can listen to anywhere you get NPR Network podcasts. You can also find more stories and resources at kpbs.org/screentime. Andrew, thanks so much.
Penalty is $75.
Bob Weir, one of the founding members of the Grateful Dead, has died at 78 years old. NPR's Isabella Gomez Sarmiento reports.
The Haight-Ashbury scene of the 1960s rejected conventional American society, and Bob Weir became one of its most prominent ambassadors.
Heading to Shreveport.
He was born in 1947 and grew up in a San Francisco suburb. He had undiagnosed dyslexia and got kicked out of multiple schools. By the time he was 17, he dropped out and joined the circus, of a kind, playing guitar in a jug band led by Jerry Garcia. It became the Grateful Dead in 1965. In a 2022 interview with NPR, Weir described the origins of his songs using the phrase hippie metaphysics.
Progress is 24%, heading to Pendleton. Darius Belpeppa has started a job from Los Angeles, going to Kingman. Pay is $197.
For decades,
there are
the
3
Grateful Dead
drivers on
amassed
this
a loyal
job.
following that trailed them on tour and traded bootleg tapes. Weir composed and sang many of the band's most notable songs, including Sugar Magnolia, Playing in the Band, and One More Saturday Night. His full-throated and fiery vocals were the perfect foil to Garcia's mellowed-out style.
Progress is 91%, heading to Houma.
The Grateful Dead officially
Rhino
came to an end
has been
with
caught
Jerry
speeding
Garcia's
by
death
California
in
Highway
1995.
Patrol.
But for the
Speed was
3 decades
94
that
miles per hour.
followed, Weir
Penalty
dedicated
is
himself to carrying the band's legacy
$285.
forward. In 2024, he reflected on being embraced by the mainstream.
Back not so long ago, we were sort of outsiders. Now, all that's kind of changed.
By refusing to conform, Bob Weir helped create an American sound unlike any other. Isabella Gomez-Sarmiento, NPR News.
Rhythm is now in Laramie. Progress is 46%, heading to Denver.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Boba Ghostof Bangladesh is now in El Paso. Progress is 62%.
The holidays are over, the decorations are packed away, and what's left is a long stretch of winter. For some people, that quieter season can bring a sense of calm, but for others it can feel isolating. So how do you find connection when the invitations slow down and the days feel short? NPR Life Kit host Mariel Segura has tips on how to grow your community.
Our show point 26 is now in Holbrook.
Priya Parker
Progress
posted on
is
Instagram
59%.
the obituary
Heading
of
to
a man
Reading.
in New Orleans named Pablo Johnson. He would host these Monday night dinners where he cooked red beans and rice and invited neighbors, friends, and even strangers to his table. Thousands of people
is now
for
in
many
Yakima.
years.
Progress
Parker
is
says in response to her
86%.
post,
Heading
she
to
kept saying to
Portland.
her, I wish I was invited to a dinner like that.
And I'm thinking, host one. Host one. Host it. And I think right now, everybody's longing for community. We long to be part of a village. We long to have people come over and help us. But when's the last time you've hosted something? When's the last time you have helped somebody move? When's the last time you picked somebody up at the airport? It's almost like community has become consumption instead of production.
Parker thinks about community and relationships a lot. She wrote a book called The Art of Gathering. And her first tip for building a village is to host something you're excited or curious about. One woman who wrote to her based a whole gathering on a tomato tart recipe that she wanted to make.
She invited 6 friends to come over that week for dinner. She made the tomato tart. She had everyone dress up in red. And then at the dinner, she asked, what made you feel like a tomato this week?
So some questions to ask yourself if you're trying to come up with an idea for a gathering.
Well, how do I want to spend my time? Or what's one activity I've been wanting to do? What's something I've been longing for? It could be simply like, I've been dying to go and check out the bookshop across town.
Has started a job from Los Angeles, going to
Let's go for a
Kingman.
little field
Pay
trip.
is $197. There are 4 drivers
And if you
on
don't
this
have a lot
job.
of people to invite, go small.
DJTNHN
1 or 2
has
guests,
just completed
maybe
a
a
job
family
to
member or a
Houma
neighbor.
in 15
You
minutes
can also
and
start meeting
21
people to invite to
seconds.
things at
A
community
Nissan
events
time
and
has been set for
institutions.
this job.
Start showing up, start becoming a
is now
regular.
number 22
There's so
on the
many
leaderboard.
places that want to be this for people.
From Sao
So
Paulo,
restaurants,
Brazil,
bookshops,
join
gyms,
the server. Driver
parks
rank is
that are wanting to bring
188.
people together.
When you're brainstorming where to go and what to do, pay attention to what makes you feel more alive. One of Parker's friends was missing playing kickball, which she used to do on the playground as a kid, so she organized a game.
And like 20 people showed up. They were so delighted, in part because she was so excited.
Now, if you do want to host something, it can help to have 1 or 2 cornerstone friends, people who are reliable, who love being around, who you know will show up, and who are game to try new things.
My husband and I have a term for these people. We call them yes friends. They're friends who always say yes. Yes, I'll do that thing with you. Yes, I'll come over. Yes, I'm down.
And to take some pressure off yourself, allow your friends to share the joy and responsibility of hosting with you.
$101.
Maybe you and a friend co-host a community dinner. Or maybe it's just that when your guests show up, you let them be useful. Give them some veggies to mince. Tell them you're responsible for tonight's playlist. We are talking about building a village, after all. When you're part of a village, you don't have to do it all alone. For NPR News, I'm Mariel Segata.
Steel 10 has started a job from Los Angeles.
For more tips, go
going
to
$197. There are 5 drivers on this job. Rhino is now in Bakersfield. Progress is 47%. Heading to San Jose.
This is NPR News.
A woman was shot and killed by an ICE agent during an encounter in Minneapolis. Federal officials have called the shooting an act of self-defense. Many say that flies in the face of what they saw play out in viral videos of the incident. We'll talk about those reactions and whether President Trump's policies played a role. I'm David Green, joined by Lathy, Mike Dumpy, and me for Left, Right, and Center.
Sonic has just completed a job to Shreveport in 35 minutes and 22 seconds. A new best time has been set for this job. Ghost Sonic is now number 104 on the leaderboard. TPD Ronald DZZ is now in Barstow. Progress is -1%. Heading to Los Angeles. Our show point 26 has been caught speeding by Arizona Highway Patrol. Speed was 87 miles per hour. Penalty
Sundays
is
at 8 p.m. on News 88.7.
Mobile Dostok Bangladesh is now in Benhor. Progress is 68%. Heading to Corpus Christi.
More agents
Minnesota
over a long-standing federal welfare fraud investigation. This comes as she again today said the ICE agent who killed last week in Minneapolis, Renee Good, did nothing wrong. Protests over her death continue around the country. In Texas, more than 130 faith leaders signed a letter to local school boards urging them not to adopt rules to allow time for school prayer. This less than 2 months to a deadline from state law passed last year. And legendary guitarist and co-founder of the Grateful Dead, Bob Weir, has died. He was 78 years old. In a statement, his family says he beat cancer last summer but died from underlying lung issues. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News.
Loco is now in Ogden. Progress is 54%. Heading to Albuquerque. Shaw 1391 is now in Ogden. Progress is 38%.
And from the Lemelson Foundation, working to harness the power of invention and innovation to accelerate climate action and improve lives around the world. Learn more at lemelson.org. From the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. And from the Skull Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world.
Rhino
Learn more
has
at
been caught speeding by
skull.org.
California Highway Patrol. Speed
This
was
is All Things
89 miles
Considered
per
from
hour.
NPR News.
Penalty
I'm
is
Sarah
$210.
Stephen Miller isn't an elected official, but there are few people with more power in America today. As the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and one of President Trump's longest-serving aides, Miller's been the driving force behind many of Trump's core policies. He's the architect of the anti-immigrant crackdown and led the push in ICE recruitment and deployment. And he's been in the spotlight recently as a driving force behind the plan to capture Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro. In a much-circulated interview this week on CNN, Miller said we live in a world, quote, governed by strength and force, and also asserted that Greenland should be part of the United States. Here to help us unpack Miller's influence and direction is Ashley Parker, staff writer for The Atlantic, and the lead author on a new piece called The Wrath of Stephen Miller. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Ashley, simply put, how powerful is Stephen Miller in this administration?
He's incredibly powerful. Steve Bannon and other people jokingly call him the Prime Minister, and I think the public in general, especially from the first term, associates Stephen Miller with Trump's hardline immigration policies, and that's certainly true. He has a big hand in immigration, but one thing we were trying to capture with his profile
is that immigration is not the only thing that Stephen Miller has his hands in, and not just hands, but has a major role on everything from immigration to Homeland Security, to law enforcement in our nation's streets, to foreign policy, to trade, and even to education. And a lot of the controversial policies coming out of the administration are either being dreamed up by Stephen Miller or executed by Stephen Miller.
You spoke with several folks within the administration about Miller's style, and you describe him as, quote, the pulsing human id of a president who is already almost pure id. What does that mean, Ashley, and how does that style shape the way that the administration is functioning?
So Stephen Miller, one thing that he's very clear about is that 59%. His job heading to Albuquerque, taking what President Trump wants to do and executing it ruthlessly and urgently. And what's interesting is there are areas where Stephen, and Trump has joked about this in public, is far more extreme than even President Trump. And so Stephen, behind the scenes, will very vigorously argue his case, make his points, make his pitch. But once Trump has decided something, he's not like some of the people, especially in the first term, right, who would tell Trump all the reasons he can't do it, or why it's the wrong thing, or try to quietly undermine him. Once Donald Trump has decided what he wants to do, Stephen is going to go out there and do it.
But you talk about Miller as somebody who has a very strong point of view. He casts political disagreements as this existential struggle between good and evil, for example. I mean, how much is Miller shaping or trying to shape the president's viewpoint versus reflecting or amplifying Trump?
Well, again, it's a combination of both, right? For starters, Stephen Miller would not be able to work for someone with whom he was not broadly aligned, because one of the things that people told us that they really like about Stephen Miller in the administration, and this might seem a little counterintuitive, is that he's a zealot. They said, we always know where he stands. That said, in some instances, he is more hardline, especially on immigration, than President Trump is. And in those instances, again, he very intensely and very forcefully makes his case in private, and so I do think there is some shaping of the president there, just because we know President Trump is often persuaded by the last person he talked to or by people he talks to frequently. But again, at the end of the day, there have been some disagreements between the two of them, and when there are those disagreements, Stephen Miller does go out and do what the president wants, regardless of his personal views. But there's not that much daylight.
A decade ago, Stephen Miller was a speechwriter for Trump. What led to his ascendance between the two Trump administrations?
I mean, he was still incredibly powerful in the first Trump term. The difference was the same guardrails that kind of constrained President Trump in that first term also constrained Stephen Miller. There were people at the Department of Homeland Security who, when he did something that they felt was too extreme or was morally reprehensible, would not follow through on his directive, and they knew that at the time when John Kelly was leading that agency, he would protect them. All of those guardrails and all of those people are gone now. And the second thing is, much like this more emboldened, unfettered, unchained President Trump we're seeing now, Stephen Miller underwent the same process. And so he basically spent his 4 years out of power working quietly and privately to ensure that if he and Trump came back to office, he would have all the levers and tools of the federal bureaucracy at his disposal.
Has just completed a job to Los Angeles.
What is it that you want people to understand about Stephen Miller and about his role in the Trump administration at this moment?
I think it's important to understand a couple things. How close to the president he is, just how broad his purview is, and how he has his hand in policies that people might not expect. Like the Trump administration's war against higher education and against Harvard, right? People, again, they think of immigration, they maybe think of foreign policy, but they don't necessarily think of all the other areas where Stephen Miller is playing a role. And I think the
other thing that's important to understand about Stephen Miller is he's confided in friends and colleagues that he does like playing this role of the gleeful contrarian or the troll who makes liberals' heads explode. But at this point, the caricature that we see on TV and interviews on CNN and elsewhere has now become his true character. There is not a real difference between public and private Stephen Miller in the intensity of his convictions.
Loco is now in price.
Ashley Parker is a staff writer for The Atlantic. Her new article is called The Wrath of Stephen Miller. Ashley, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, of course. Thank you for doing this.
The documentary industry is big business, bigger than ever by some estimates. We've got celebrity docuseries, true crime tales, and gorgeous nature films narrated by folks like David Attenborough. And as always, documentarians are also tackling thornier stories about geopolitics and history, as well as pop culture. 2025 alone brought new documentaries about grappling with terminal illness.
This is the beginning of a nightmare, I thought. But stay with me, because my story is one about happiness.
The burden of Black genius.
Sly the Family Stone. It can't be overstated how massively popular this is.
And a re-examination of the TV show To Catch a Predator.
Some people watching this may feel like you have something to answer for. What do you say to that?
Those were clips from Come See Me in the Good Light, Sly Lives, and Predators, just for a sense of the breadth of documentaries being produced. So today we're talking about documentaries that stood out to us in recent years. And I'm joined by Pop Culture Happy Hour host Linda Holmes and Sarah Handel, an editor on All Things Considered. Thanks to you both.
Progress is 61%.
Linda, I'll start with you.
Pendleton.
When you're looking to watch a documentary, what grabs you?
You know, a lot of award-winning documentaries in particular are
Rhino
about
has
big
just
news
completed
stories,
a job
like,
in San
as you
Jose
mentioned,
in
geopolitics,
24 minutes
wars,
and 48
and,
seconds.
you know, deservedly
A
so.
new
But when I'm
best time
watching
has been set
just
for
for
this
myself,
job. Rhino
I often
is now
gravitate
number
toward
60
kind
on the
of niche
leaderboard.
topics, people I've never heard of, or hobbies that small communities are very, very passionate about, people who are trying to answer some sort of obscure question about the world. And so I look for ones that are going to teach me something, but it doesn't have to be a big, important thing. It can be something small, like something I didn't even know that I didn't know.
Sarah, what about you? When you watch documentaries, what are you
looking? For me, I'm nosy, and I think that's probably why I became a journalist. I love hearing other people's stories. I want to know about the ways they live, and so when I watch a documentary, I'm usually trying to gain entrance to a world that normally I would have absolutely no access to. And at the end of said documentary, whatever kind of world I've entered, I want to learn something about how people operate, what makes them tick, what they're passionate about, the things that matter to them, and the way those preferences connect to the larger picture of humanity.
Sounds familiar, that opportunity to be nosy or to peer into a space that you wouldn't otherwise get to see. You know, with that in mind, what are some recent documentaries that have resonated with you?
For me, the one that I immediately thought of when I realized we were going to have this conversation was a documentary from 2023. It's called The Stroll.
The minute I got off on 14th Street, you gave the clickety-clack of the hills.
It's the story of the mostly black trans women of color who used to walk what they called the stroll in the meatpacking district before that area of New York got gentrified. And they did sex work on those streets.
There are 5 drivers on
she
this
has
job.
incredible archives of that work, and she talks with 4 or 5 other women from that time, and they're all still connected. And while it's certainly a story of hardship, it's really a story about sisterhood and love and activism, and it just, I wasn't there. I couldn't have been there. Mm-hmm. And now I feel like I know these people. And that's just such a special feeling, I think, that you can get through documentary that it's rare to get elsewhere.
You know, there are some documentaries that almost seem like you have to see them because they just become such a big part of the zeitgeist and the conversation. I'm thinking, again, going back a bit to An Inconvenient Truth, the climate change documentary by former Vice President Al Gore.
Our ability to live is what is at stake.
That one's 20 years old this year.
Loud and clear.
Or Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine, which is even a little bit older, about America's gun crisis.
How do you think we have so many gun murders in America?
Everybody's first reaction is pull the gun out.
Are there any documentaries in this more diffuse era of streaming where there are so many options out there? Are there any that kind of hold that same status today?
2 minutes and 22
I think Linda and I both think of, and let me know if I'm speaking out of turn, Linda. We both think of 20 Days in Mariupol as one of those.
Russians have entered the city. The war has begun, and we have to tell its story.
This was in 2023. It's a team of Ukrainian journalists who are trapped in Mariupol working for the AP as the Russians invaded. It's astonishing footage of the country and the conflict.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably my vote for the most essential. Another one that I really think a lot of people saw because it ended up being nominated for a couple of Oscars was Flea. Which was a few years ago, and it was an animated documentary, which is really, it's a fascinating experiment with form about a guy who left Afghanistan as a refugee. And it's an absolutely riveting film, and I think it's absolutely something everybody should see, both because of the subject matter and because it's very important, if you care about documentaries, to prioritize and think about and value the filmmaking and not just to the transfer of information. And so I love that film partly because it is so different from so many other ones in the way that it's presented.
You mentioned animated documentaries, which is, not a technique that it sort of sounds counterintuitive, right? Animation in a documentary. But one film that I saw this past year from a couple years ago was a documentary about the Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, Soul on Fire.
One of the things that every survivor has to face and does face today is the fact of its own survival.
Just finished my job training with the boys. Like
still being here.
It used animation really to take people back to scenes from the camps, which, again, very counterintuitive. I wouldn't have ever imagined it, but I thought it was really effective and really profound, and it kind of depicts something that we've all seen images of in a way that's fresh. So it's interesting to see the techniques that some of these documentarians employ to tell their stories.
Sure. I think about the films that the wonderful filmmaker Raoul Peck makes, including one that came out recently called Orwell 2 + 2 = 5, which is really just a combination of the writings of George Orwell, particularly 1984, and footage of often unrelated things or seemingly unrelated things, including things from kind of present day. And it's really the juxtaposition that does all the work.
Finally, is there any documentary that either one of you have seen that maybe was a little off the radar that you think people should just check out if they've missed it in recent years, something that deserved a wider audience?
Okay, for me, this documentary is Midnight Family. I feel like nobody saw it, and I just was riveted. It came out in 2019, and it's about the world of for-profit private ambulance drivers in Mexico City.
Progress is 91%. Heading to Kingman.
It profiles this one family who's in this business and the relationships that they have to have with the hospitals so that they get the call to go get the person who needs to be moved. And they're performing this service and they're barely getting by, and it's just so exciting and propulsive, and I was fascinated.
I would call out a 2025 film that has certainly had a certain amount of attention, but I really hope people will continue to watch it, and that's The Perfect Neighbor, which is about a black woman who was shot and killed by a white woman in her neighborhood.
911 was the address of the emergency.
And most of it is made up of police body camera footage responding to reports of incidents between the two of them. And you see how this develops over time and how it kind of moves toward this terrible conclusion. And I think it's extremely hard to watch, but I think it's a very, very good movie.
That was NPR's Sarah Handel and Linda Holmes. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
NPR comes from the station. And from FJC, a foundation of donor-advised funds, working to maximize the impact of charitable giving and to create customized philanthropic solutions. Learn more at fjc.org. And from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, recognizing extraordinary and creative individuals whose ideas, solutions, and discoveries expand people's expectations of what's possible. MacFound.org. This is NPR.
Count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 or more per month, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a few minutes to make a big difference. Become a new member today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, presenting Art and Life in Imperial Rome, Trajan and His Times, exploring the impact Emperor Trajan had on art and culture during his reign. Now on view, tickets at mfah.org.
When ChatGPT came out a few years ago, many students saw an opportunity.
It just writes it for you, and it's really good. You guys should try it.
And their teachers could tell.
You can pick it out almost instantly.
Generative AI crashed the party in education, and schools are still scrambling to adjust.
It's gone downhill really quickly.
MIT's Teach Lab presents The Homework Machine, a series about K-12 education in the age of artificial intelligence.
Sunday night at 9 p.m. on News 88.7. Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
From KCRW, this is Left, Right, and Center.
This is Left, Right, and Center. ICE agents surged into Minneapolis, and now a 37-year-old woman is dead, shot by an ICE agent in her car. The question is why. Witnesses and videos suggest the woman, Renee Nicole Good, was trying to drive away from the scene after ICE agents approached her. Federal officials say she was posing a danger and that the agent who fired the shot was acting in self-defense. The mayor of Minneapolis warned citizens not to lose their calm to avoid falling right into the Trump administration's trap. We'll talk about if that really is a trap and whether the president's policies have laid the groundwork for all this. Later, the president's decision to conduct a military operation in Venezuela and remove that country's president without telling lawmakers. Trump, who is expected to be an isolationist, now has the U.S. deeply involved abroad, even now running another country. We have a lot to cover, and all of it's coming up next on Left, Right, Center.
Has just completed a job to Kingman in 24 minutes and 0 seconds.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Leaders in Iran are warning of a harsh response if the U.S. and Israel attack over the protests that have engulfed the country over the past 2 weeks. Iranian security forces are cracking down, and human rights groups say more than 500 people have been killed, thousands detained. NPR's Jackie Northam has more. Iran's parliament speaker said Tehran would consider U.S. military facilities and Israel legitimate targets for preemptive strikes if they're assigned by either country if an imminent attack. Iran's military was badly weakened after the 12-day war with Israel last June. President Trump has warned the U.S. will hit hard if Iran kills protesters and reiterated that in a social media post Saturday evening, saying the U.S. stands ready to help. The protests that began at the end of December over the economy have quickly spread to all corners of Iran. People shouted death to the dictator, meaning Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Jackie Northam, NPR News. The European Union's top defense official says it's time for the bloc to set up its own Security Council amid the uncertainty of Europe's relationship with the U.S. Terry Schultz has more.
EU Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius says Europe is under pressure, mentioning the new U.S. security strategy which de-emphasizes the transatlantic relationship, President Trump's intervention in Venezuela, and his intention to take over Greenland.
The time for Pax Americana is over. We need to be defense ready inside NATO, but with much less American presence.
Kubilius is renewing earlier proposals to create a European version of the UN Security Council with rotating membership and possible participation of the UK.
I believe it's now an urgent task to turn this idea
going to
into
Waco.
reality.
He says the first priority for the new body would be to increase support for Ukraine. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in
Los
Brussels.
Angeles. Progress is
Faith leaders from across Texas signed an open letter to local school boards urging them not to adopt rules carving out time for school prayer, as mandated by a law that sets a deadline in less than 2 months. Houston Public Media's Andrew Schneider has more.
The law requires public school boards and charter school governing bodies to vote on whether to set time aside during the school day for periods of prayer or Bible readings. Reverend Laura Mayo is the senior minister of Covenant Church in Houston and the mother of 2 students in Houston Independent School District.
One of my professors in graduate school used to say, as long as there are math tests, there'll be prayer in school. Students can already pray. They can already form religious clubs. This is not needed. It does not solve a problem. It creates problems.
The deadline for Texas school boards to vote on school prayer policies under the law is March 1st. For NPR News, I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
DJTNHN is now in Beaumont. Progress is minus
Google
1%.
is expanding the shopping features in its Gemini AI chatbot, teaming up with big retailers including Walmart and Shopify. The goal is to turn the app into a virtual merchant as well as an assistant. The instant checkout function will let customers buy things using a range of payment providers without leaving the Gemini chat they used to find the products. The role of artificial intelligence and its impact on customers is expected to dominate the 3-day National Retail Federation's annual convention. It gets started today. Grateful Dead fans or Deadheads are mourning the loss of guitarist and founding member Bob Weir, who died yesterday at the age of 78. Billy Cruz from member station KQED has more from San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, where the Dead briefly lived in the 1960s.
Outside the band's former home in San Francisco, fans are laying roses, a common motif of the band, and letters on the front steps. One of those fans is Russell Beatty, who came with his friends to pay respects.
There's nothing else in life that really resonates with my soul the way the music does. Nothing else that I really feel I relate to or get to experience the deep emotions in life too.
The death of Weir leaves drummer Bill Kreutzmann as the last living member of the original Grateful Dead. For NPR News, I'm Billy Cruz in San Francisco.
U.S. futures contracts are trading flat at this hour. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
You guys down for another convoy?
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Alfred E. Sloan Foundation, supporting books, radio, podcasts, film, television, theater, to encourage science and the humanities, and the listeners who support this NPR station.
Hi, I'm John Donvan, host of Open to Debate, where we bring you open-minded discussions and debates about the issues affecting our lives. Everything from science and tech to politics, culture, and foreign policy. In our divided nation, we feel it's more important than ever for people to be open-minded, open to disagreement, and open to listening to the other side. Join me in being open to debate.
Sunday night at 10 p.m. on News 88.7.
ZZZ has started a job from Los
Welcome to Left, Right,
Angeles
Center, everybody.
going
I'm
to
David
Kingman.
Green.
Pay is
On Tuesday this past week, the Department of Homeland Security tweeted out, "Good morning, Minneapolis." This came as ICE agents were surging into that city. ICE Director Todd Lian said they were targeting companies hiring illegal workers and continuing their investigation into massive fraud scandals in Minnesota. On Wednesday, a 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis was killed in her car during an encounter with ICE agents. She was identified by the Minneapolis Star-Tribune as Renee Nicole Good. The newspaper spoke to her mom. Videos from that scene that have now gone viral show an ICE agent shooting at her car. She was shot and she died soon after at a hospital. Federal officials are defending this shooting, saying the woman attempted to use her car to injure law enforcement officers. But that narrative has come into question as video of the incident began to spread. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry had a very clear message for ICE agents.
device.
TPD Ronald
Get out of
ZZZ has teleported. The job has been canceled. $500 penalty
Your stated
applied.
reason for being in the city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the
Heading to
opposite.
Denver.
The mayor also sent a message to the people of his city to stay peaceful.
They want us to respond in a way that creates a military occupation in our city. They want an excuse to come in and show the kind of force that will create more chaos and more
is now in
despair.
Houston. Progress is 15%. Heading to Waco.
Let's rise to this occasion.
All right, there's a lot to process about where things stand now after this incident, and the situation continues to develop, and that's where we're going to start today with our left, right, and center panel. On the left, we have Mo Lathy, Executive Director at Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and Public Service. He was Communications Director for the Democratic National Committee. And Mike Dupke, veteran GOP communications strategist and advisor. Mike was the White House Director of Communications under President Trump in 2017. Mike, I want to start with you. I mean, President Trump has now done a pretty lengthy interview with the New York Times where this incident came up, and he showed the journalists from the Times video of the incident that he and his staff were, showing them on a laptop.
Rhino is now in Kingman.
The president has been defending this action by this ICE agent. Lots of people who have seen the video have a different view. What did you see? How would you describe what you saw happen
if
here?
you're asking for my opinion, what I saw was a very sad situation unfold in which individuals' lives were put in danger, and a misjudgment, whether you believe it's from the officer or from the woman who put herself in that situation during that particular period of time, the way that it unfolded, there's nobody in that situation that can feel good about, well, obviously the outcome, but the overall situation that we're in right now. And so you asked me how I feel. I feel as sad, and I hate doing this because people don't listen to this show or listen to us for, our personal takes. But you asked me my personal take, I'll give you. I felt sad right after the incident, the same way I felt sad about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And what I'm saying about that is I feel like our country is at a point now where we say things first and then we think second. We're at a place where confrontation is more important than reasoned debate, than conversation. And both sides were confronting each other in this situation. The outcome was incredibly sad. And I just that was my feeling of abject sadness, that a woman lost her life, and that officer's life is obviously ruined as well. And probably for most of the bystanders, this is going to be imprinted on their psyche for the rest of their lives.
Can I just ask you before I turn to you, Mo? Mike, one thing you said was you saw that people's lives were in danger. And, I mean, from just a purely investigative perspective here, that's going to be so important. Like when it comes to law enforcement using weapons and taking people's lives, a lot of it goes to whether they saw a clear and present danger for themselves or for other people. I mean, many people who've seen this did not, at least on first view. Again, the investigation is going to hopefully go forward. That will be very fair and look at this in a very sober way. When you said personally you saw people
has just completed a job for
what was striking you?
I mean, it is a motor vehicle is defined by law enforcement and others, and I'm getting into territory I wish not to get into, as a deadly weapon. And so when I say people's lives were in danger, the officer was clipped. He wasn't hit. It didn't look like he was hit that hard. But that car, after the shooting, and you saw the video of it speed off, that could have hit untold number of people standing on the sidewalk. It happened to hit a car and a telephone pole, but both of the vehicle and the weapon that was used to shoot the woman, that's what I meant by that. There were two deadly weapons on the street at the same time, and that's what I was referring to.
I guess the car speeding off, we had no idea.
Now in Huntsville.
Speeding off, she had already been hit by
Heading to Waco.
But I mean, let me turn to you, Mo. Same question. I mean, what did you see?
I saw. Look, I share all of Mike's emotion and sadness. I saw and felt